CK, welcome back. It's been far too long, although not much has really happened in the world since you were last on the show.
Yeah, what is there even to talk about?
I don't know what we're going to discuss.
Yeah, nothing. I mean,
No,
surely.
nothing.
Maybe we should, just take polls from the audience.
Obviously, we have a lot to cover today. But first and foremost, obviously, I follow you very closely on social media. That's like my main way I get to keep up with you and what's going on with you. It's probably vice versa. And you've been very active in Austin, Texas, marching as part of the protest in the Black Lives Matter movement. How has that experience been on the ground floor in Austin?
You know what? It's again, there's just so much dichotomy in the world right now, and I think that's going to be the theme for this conversation. And I think for you, knowing me now, you probably, if anybody who's ever heard me on this show, balance is the name of my mantra, right? It's all about balance. And so
yes.
in life, I think that one, it was simultaneously super motivational and inspirational and positive, while also very difficult and disheartening and heartbreaking. That, I mean, this is probably the fourth or fifth march that I've been in for something similar. Granted, I got to admit, it is feeling a little different this time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more. And I think that, the reason why I even got involved in the first place was before I can figure out anything that I can do or should do, it was a solidarity moment.
Right.
It was a kind of moment where, I mean, I hear comedians say that before, where if you see 14 people running away, you should just, before you ask the question, just start running first. And then when you could take a breath, go, well, what are we running from?
Right.
You know what I mean? That might be a foolish way to think about it, but it's a weird analogy.
I understand what you're saying.
But what I'm trying to say is, while we're trying to figure out what exactly is happening, or solidarity, there's a point where I go, I agree with the broad strokes of what's happening. I agree with everything on its face value. How I play my role, I haven't figured that out yet, but let's march until we figure that out.
Sure. And I think that's where a lot of us are, where it's like, especially a lot of white people. And I think you mentioned this time feels different. It feels way different from where I'm sitting. And as a white guy who knows mostly white people, it's been, and I'm curious as to your thoughts on why this is. Obviously, you're not white and you're not black.
Yeah.
So you have a good perspective on sort of a third-party perspective on this whole situation. And then you have your own perspective as an Asian American who's, I'm sure, experienced some of these things in your lifetime as well, which is we're going to get into some of that later. But I have noticed more white people, myself included. Now, I always had an understanding of the racial issues in America on some level. And that level increased as I grew in age and life experience and started to figure out some things on my own, not just going off the textbooks I read in 3rd and 5th and 7th grade or whatever, right? Which were mostly painted up for me as a white dude, always in the most positive light. Everything we did in America, like from Christopher Columbus discovering America, it was never like, yo, he discovered America, but like some really fucked up shit had to happen for it to then.
To America.
They never said any of that. It was just straight up like, this dude was a hero. He was the first person to discover it. He took care of everything. Hey, peep this dinner they had. It's called Thanksgiving. We celebrate that. By the way, there was slavery for a little bit. We got rid of that shit though. It was tight. America, baby. And as like a little white dude, you're like, that sounds legit. It's pretty much on par with my experience here on this earth.
That's right. Then
the older you get, you're like, oh. So this one for me though, was very eye-opening, and that a lot of the systematic side of it has clicked a lot more for me.
Yeah.
That's something white people don't have any experience with, and that frankly, from a messaging standpoint, has obviously never been properly communicated to white people who care. I have never fully understood, and I can't, fully understand, but I've never even had that moment where I was like, fuck, dude, America is a totally different place if you're waking up and you're not white.
Right. Mm-hmm. As an institution.
It's not just like people want to point at one thing and make it about one thing.
Right.
You'll get these people who will bring up, I got into it on Twitter with people this weekend, with people bringing up George Floyd's, his toxicology report.
Right.
And
I have some stuff to say about that.
And I was like, bro, if you better keep that same energy when they come for me, because if they test me right now, I've got Xanax and weed in my system. They're going to say I was high, and it's not the case. Like,
right.
And you're missing the fucking point entirely. What the shit does that have to do? Like, if anything, that further clarifies the issue, which is that this was a man that felt like he needed to be on those things for it to even get through fucking life, which is just like, and I know it's easy for white people to justify all this shit away, but that systematic side of it had never clicked for me before, where to this degree, where now I'm like, oh my God, dude. Like, I get the anger. I never understood the outrage to the degree that I do now. Right. And that's the thing that's changed for me.
Well, I mean, I think that, I think it's important. What you said, and again, there's this conversation, like you said, when you and I were talking about what we're going to talk about, I was like, it doesn't matter. It's not going to go. No, it's not going to go the way we think it's going to go.
I was like, I got some prepared questions here.
Yeah, but the to unpack all this is, let's start with a couple things that you just said that I think that is very poignant and systemic concepts. So here's the thing that we're going to think about stuff like this, is that the difficult part about this is inherent in all of us and all of us humans, is that we are predisposed to try to, once we believe something, especially if it's something that we identify with, it's something that that
works for us.
Well, not even works. It's something that we have built on top of, built identity onto.
Yes.
That to unravel that feels like you're going to crumble your whole world, right?
And people take offense to it as a result.
I mean, think about the arguments that people have about Santa Claus. A fundamental fictional creature that flies around to houses, dropping off gifts, and then the conversation of whether or not this person has a race has been a topic of debate, because in their head, they're like, how am I going to explain this to my child? What about all these memories I have? Is that wrong? I mean, and you start to crumble and you start to do mental gymnastics, as I call it, as we're all doing, to try to justify those things. There's a great, I think it's Vox, or maybe it might have been the Oatmeal, actually. I think it was, that little comic that does the thing. I talk about that, about how when you say something, if I told you something that doesn't really matter too much to you, and you're like, hey, do you know that guy's actually left-handed? And you're like, oh, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
not going to argue with you.
Right. But
I could give a fuck. Yeah.
Right. But if something fundamentally different, meaning sitting there going, all right, check this out. You know that Jesus has all these depictions of long hair, but I was like, he actually had a real short buzz cut.
Like, people were like, whoa, man.
Yeah, it's like, what are you talking about?
Don't fuck with my image of Jesus, bro.
Right. And it would really, 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 and I purposefully picked that example to try not to go into the other debate that would be, but that's something
it's all part of the same fucking debate.
Thoughts, the same idea, right? It's that literally that it's very difficult for people to let go of this, because, again, even without trying, you fundamentally realize that this creates a waterfall avalanche of beliefs that have to change because of this.
Yes,
right?
And that's daunting. And for white people, I think that's very, very scary. That's a big part of why we don't want to accept.
It's super difficult. I mean, perfect example, and I'll touch on it quickly because, again, this is so much bigger, obviously, than one person.
Sure.
But the George Floyd toxicology report. I said, for me, my semantical mind, I'm very semantical and I'm very detail-oriented, and this is the way that I think. I was like, okay, great, I'll give you that. Give me this. Two situations that could occur of this. Number one, they knew this about him before this happened. They knew. Then they made the decision to do this.
Yeah.
So we're saying that if that's the case, then you're okay with that.
Then that's okay.
Then it's okay.
He was high.
Or not even high. Like, that's high. People can argue that. People can go, he was acting weird, so I was scared. Just his rap sheet about what he did or anything like that. So they're saying that these cops knew about his rap sheet, or knew about what his history was, who he was beyond that of somebody who allegedly had a fake $20 bill, right?
Right.
And then they made that decision that this was okay. And that's what you're justifying by saying that. Or option B is they didn't know those things And then it doesn't matter anyways then. Then that's a non-point. Then we
It's
found
like,
out that
why
after.
why are we
Right.
even like that's the thing that gets so frustrating with these people.
Well, the conversation is what I'm saying is that you are trying to do these mental gymnastics to justify it and not realize that these two things can exist in the same world. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's the whole thing, is to say that, yes, I mean, there literally is, like, whenever you find instances of a perfect person, religions are formed around them. You know what I mean?
That's what's funny to me. To believe that George Floyd, or anyone for that matter, look, think about every celebrity ever. The more famous they get, the more shit comes out about them, the more fucking crazy their lives get, the more exposed they are, the more they have to go into hiding and live in private, basically. Like
Right.
Leonardo DiCaprio is the perfect example.
Right.
I loved Wahlberg's shit coming out this most recent dude. Turns out Wahlberg was racist as fuck growing up, like committing hate crimes, like violently attacking people because of the color of their skin, which is like, we're laughing, but it's like, it's fucking absurd.
Yeah.
My point is this. And I use me as an example because I have a very fucked up rap sheet myself. It's not pretty. And just like George Floyd's, it has the word cocaine all over it. And if you use that, and again, if you look at the years on his rap sheet, most of it is like 10 years ago, bro. If I die, which I will one day, allegedly, and they use my rap sheet to try to define me, which I'm sure they will.
It's not going to be a pretty picture.
But it's just not accurate. It
Right.
doesn't fucking matter. That was a short period of my life where dude, that's not even to say that I won't get into more trouble. The point is this. What the fuck does that have to do with a cop murdering a human being or doing anything that results in a human being's death?
So here's the thing. I literally was watching this. Obviously, I've been voraciously consuming as much as I could about everything.
Yeah.
Bryan Stevenson, a lawyer that I believe, and again, I wish I knew more of his history. Just started really kind of following him as much as possible. But he had a TED Talk, and it was talking about, because he was talking about injustice and so on and so forth, and he represents largely young children on like death row.
Okay, cool.
Children, whatever. And one of the things he talks about is we are quick to jump on whether or not someone deserved to die, deserved to get murdered, and we don't ever really talk about whether or not we deserve to kill somebody. And that whether or not we deserve that privilege,
the right,
that quote unquote honor, that quote unquote burden, right?
Right.
And that was fundamentally that blew my mind to have it verbalized that way. I knew that I was struggling with that concept, and I couldn't figure out what I was struggling with. And he really galvanized it for me, because that's the part that what I'm seeing is, when you're having this conversation with somebody who disagrees with you, the first instance is the tendencies for you to try to justify what happened. And if you can't justify that this person deserved what happened to them, then step two, or it could technically go in either way, but step two is usually trying to justify that this person had no choice. That this was a decision, a justified decision.
The cops had no choice.
Anything.
Okay.
Like, I would think that this is just the way that anything that you are struggling with as a person, you tend, and I'm going to
validate it in this way.
I'm going to try to get further back onto the spectrum and try to go more human than necessarily
the specific situation.
Right. Because I think right now the conversation really goes towards not the how, but the why. Sure. Right. And this is what I think the people who have been fighting this for a long time have been on for a while. Everyone focuses on the how right now, because they feel like if I can just check this off and breathe a little bit better,
I can go back to my life.
But the how is not nearly as important as why this happened. It's treating the symptom and not the disease, right?
Yes.
And so in this case, that concept of saying the justification of being able to justify, did they deserve to die? That's an easy place to go. That's an easy place to stand. I can give you 7 scenarios and go, quick, tell me, does this person deserve to die? All right, this person murdered and killed a kid. And you're like, oh, probably killed that dude.
Sure.
this guy stole a loaf of bread. No, don't do that.
No, don't.
You know what I'm saying? Like you can go boom, boom, boom. As I get a little bit more complicated, you're going to go, well, give me more information about that person.
Sure.
Give me blah, 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 blah. But then let's go the other way. I go, here's 7 people. I'm going to give you a gun. You decide which one of these people gets to be in our community to write, and the burden and the ability to kill someone, to use lethal force.
I got to distribute the weapon?
Yes, you have to
God.
decide, because literally you're sitting there, we as a community have decided that this organization, the police department,
Needs to exist.
has that authority.
Yeah.
We give doctors the authority after 8 years of med school, 4 years of residency, 2 years of this, 9 years of that, $1 million in debt,
Right.
to prescribe a medicine that could be dangerous or super helpful. That's what we've agreed to through this many checkbox that says that this guy's allowed to do that.
Societally, we are all on the same page.
Whether
yeah.
we were part of that decision or not, that's what we've
It's
decided.
just a thing that's
right.
there.
And so right now, that's what I'm saying is that's fundamental. That question that he posed blew my mind, because I was like, that's the question I'm asking. Because the question is this. I remember the first time one of my friends, who I deemed was kind of a fuck up in college, I found out became a doctor. And I go,
Yeah.
I really hope that this person changed their life around. Because this person,
Was an ass.
was irresponsible as fuck.
Sure.
Like, this person was a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, a little known fact, one of the reasons why I'm not a teacher right now, remember I went to a school for education, was, to me, I feel like I'm still kind of irresponsible. I still wake up late. My teacher never really showed up late to class. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude, I don't have the characteristics of a teacher.
Yeah, I was like, oh, man, I can't you imagine I'm the guy that's going to wake up at noon and then realize that I missed the first 4 periods of my class on it?
It's problematic.
Who knows? It's problematic. And that literally, I struggled with that for years. And so that is a question, like I said, to pose to you and sit there and say, all right, let's say we put that much scrutiny on the same person that we are diving through from birth till the moment they died, of if they did anything to justify this action of why they deserve to die, and go, great, do that. You're allowed to do that. Take that same energy and go, I'm going to do that level of scrutiny to find out if this person has the burden, the ability, the wherewithal, the strength, the knowledge, the intellect, the everything, that I'm going to give them the power to make this decision in a split second.
To end lives.
And not to say, again, that's a whole nother debate whether or not that should even be a thing, but I'm just saying, are you even thinking about that? Because I personally...
Because that's a big side of it.
We haven't thought about that.
That we all just agreed to, sort of.
We
Right.
see that, and this is an assumption thing.
Now, that's
right?
the thing. That's what so many of my issues have been with this. That's where a lot of the issues that I've identified that in the past were still there, unidentified.
Right.
I had a lot of assumptions, and you mentioned this earlier, that when you have them as like, okay, so like as a white dude, as a little kid, when they start to teach you this shit, like American history is really the first cornerstone of it you get.
Right.
That as a white person, you're like, well, goddamn, this is a sweet setup.
Right.
Like, seems like everything's pretty hunky-dory for me. Pretty quickly, you get that idea. Then everything is built on top of that, and it's like, for somebody to tell you, as a 35-year-old, let's say, I'm 33, let's say, but I got friends that are a little older, and there's some, and some of them are in this crowd we're speaking to, that's like, they're having a lot of trouble with this because they don't want to reanalyze the scope of their entire lives through the guise of,
it's uncomfortable.
I have essentially been, it's almost like it feels like I've been cheating without acknowledging it. And other people have been getting shit on because I've been complicit with my silence and my ignorance.
So let me ask you a question, and this is something important to think about also. Did your parents pull aside and talk to you about race?
Yes.
In what way?
In the way that my parents made it very clear to me, I went to a predominantly white school from preschool to 8th grade. I remember I was laughing with my dad about this on the phone yesterday. I was like, the first black person we got at St. Francis was Clyde Drexler's kids.
Right.
An NBA player, man.
Right.
So like, no, man, like I didn't grow up with any black people around me from preschool to 8th grade.
Right.
Then I went to public high school, and that changed everything. And it's part of the reason that I have a little bit more perspective and a little more balanced than I would have. But my parents, as a result of that, were very intentional. And both of on my dad's side, I would say this: there was not a whole lot of racism to be dealt with. It was a family from the North. I mean, my grandparents were from Indiana on that side and shit. Like, they don't, and they're fucking Dutch or something. They just don't have that. So it wasn't an issue my dad's side had to really address. My mom's side is from East Texas or whatever, bro. Like,
from South.
Plenty of racism. And it definitely was something that had to be addressed on my mom's side of the family and continues to need to be addressed. But because of that, my parents told me time and again, I can remember specifically the message was, and because they were my parents raised me Christian is the thing. This aligned with, they taught the accurate, in my opinion, version of Christianity. There's a great line in Run the Jewels 4 where LP says, if you fucking paid, these are not his words, I'm paraphrasing, but he says if you paid even a lick of attention to what Jesus said, you'd act completely differently and talk completely differently and look at this completely differently, but nobody wants to actually
hear that.
Yes. So, but the point is this: yes, my parents, it was a thing they had to go out of their way to make sure I understood, though, that first of all, this isn't the real world. You live in a bubble.
That's wonderful.
And that you are a privileged person who is very, very fucking lucky, and that there are a lot of people who are not like you. Yes.
So I think that that speaks to, and if I were to guess, I would have guessed the same thing, because of your willingness right now to speak about this. I would venture to say that most they didn't talk about it in that way, in that intentional way.
In the South, especially.
Whereas I feel like in my straw poll of just random people of color that I've talked to, we all have a moment where our parents pulled us aside to break the hard truth to us, right? I remember
it's going to be different.
It's going to be different. Like I said, I talked to my mom just about it the other day because my nephew was just born like 3 days ago. What day? Yeah, maybe a week ago now.
Well, nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I was talking about, and she didn't even remember it this way. It was just, this is how much matter of fact it was. But it was probably around 9 years old. And I just remember so vividly that she was just like, you do know that you're not going to be American to people.
Man, that's fucked up.
Nobody is ever going to look at you and think American.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. I mean, honestly, dude,
they said that she was like, that's the truth. She says, and the direction that she was going with it, and I get it also, was she goes, you're representing your people. She did it to make me work harder. She said, if you're lazy, people are going to say Chinese people are lazy. If you don't study hard, they're going to say Chinese people don't study hard. You have it. That's your responsibility to represent all of your people. That was her lesson. I was like,
good.
Oh, great. 9 years old. Can I play with my Lego? But obviously it stuck with me. And it's true. I mean, I think most people, if they were to sit there and say, hey, it's CK, my big ass Chinese friend, right? You wouldn't sit there with my big American friend. That's just,
well, it's not descriptive enough.
Right. It's not descriptive enough. And the thing about it, it's not even not descriptive enough. If I told you, hey, my American friend, the picture that you paint in your head is different.
It's different.
Looks more like this. Right.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not with the mugshot, but yeah.
Yeah. But
sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so again, this is implicit bias. Right.
Yeah.
This is not here's the thing. And again, we might be derailing a little bit.
Not really. I mean, it's all tied to this issue. I think
it's important for me, and one of the things I talk to people about lately is we need to start removing the inherent positive and negative tones or implications of certain things, of words. Words describe things. Words describe things that we have to try to communicate, right? You might sit there, when I sit there and say there are hungry children in the world, that sounds negative. When I say I'm hungry for justice, that's positive.
Yeah.
When I say I'm hungry for a sandwich, that's neutral. It's normal. And so that word is not inherently or implicitly positive or negative.
Right.
I feel like there's certain words that are so commonly resorted to positive and negative things that it's very hard for us to break free of them. And thus, when I say something to someone like your privilege, you react defensively against it. And I think that we need to remember stuff like privilege used to be, or can be, still be, a positive thing. I have the privilege of speaking in front of a bunch of people today.
Sure.
That is a privilege, right? When I say that you are privileged to do this, it is a head start. It is a representation of a higher level of honor or a higher level of something in any way. Now, whether you choose to exploit that privilege or whether you choose to build an entire system that oppresses people, that's your use of that privilege, and that makes that a negative thing.
Right.
But I think that we are so commonly using that word in this way that I think people react viscerally to it without even thinking about it.
Which
You know
is,
what I mean?
there's so many of those in
So
this
many.
situation.
Right.
But white privilege being one, it came up this morning in one of my text groups with all white guys, where one of them was like, was upset about the use of that word being thrown around so much. I'm like, I remember a point in my life where I found that word to be strange. And the reaction I had as a white person was to be defensive because it made it sound like I hadn't earned my life.
That's right.
And the thing that you eventually come to understand as a man at some point down the road, now some people it takes a really, really long time, is that you didn't.
Well, in general.
And I mean this,
Yeah.
yes, in general. It really
Yeah.
has nothing to do with your race. It's just that in general, you didn't earn, like, this stuff. Look, man, that's just not the way it works. And then if you're white, it's like, if you can't wrap your head around, this is very simple, that America was founded by white Christian straight or closeted men for white Christian straight or closeted men, and everything since then has been built on top of that. That's where the white privilege comes in, because everything is easier for us because the system was literally built for us. Like, if you can't acknowledge that, then it's because you actually have guilt. It's because you have the white guilt you make fun of. That's what's ironic to me. Like, people, a lot of people on Twitter chirp at me that I have some type of guilt and that's the reason I want to speak about all this shit. Like, it makes me feel better. It doesn't make me feel better. But I also don't have guilt anymore. I did. There was very much a point in my life, like I said, where I was defensive about, like, white privilege being thrown at me, like that was some kind of attack on my existence as a white American man. Like, nah, dude, no, fuck that. Like, it's not unfair. I earned all this. Like, dude, bro, it has nothing to do with you personally.
That's right. And I think the thing about privilege that's interesting to think about really is it's the fact of the matter is it's not earned, right? There's height privilege, male privilege, sight privilege. I mean, these are all things that inherently change the deck. And a lot of it is particularly is that the definition by it is really that he can't really be earned in a way. You know what I mean? And so I think that, again, that conversation is difficult. Like, it's so funny. I use the word a lot. It's coincidental that this is all happening on the backdrop of COVID, right? Because the parallels that I've been seeing have been crazy similar. Meaning, here we have a problem, a disease that affects the entire world in a very unanimous way, but affects it to the point where some people don't feel it at all, and some people feel it to the worst degree, to the final degree. And matter of fact, if you're talking about privilege, it is the position of healthy privileged people to literally say, why am I being put through this when this is not going to affect me? That's what's happening.
You want to know a perfect example of that?
Health privilege. That's privilege.
I was talking to my mom about this. My mom is a 62-year-old white woman. And I said, Mom, has your life ever changed based on who was elected? Ever? She said, no. I've voted in 2 or 3 presidential elections. I've lived through 7 or 8 or whatever presidents, or 5. I don't fucking know. I might sound like an idiot. 8.
Yeah.
Look, nothing ever changes for me. You know why? Because I'm a middle-class white guy.
Right.
This shit, that's been a huge part of the problem, dude. For people like me, we have no reason to ever stop and actually look at shit until it's communicated in a way to where we can go, holy God, that's unignorable.
Well, I mean, but again, that's the unfortunate part, that it has to hit to that level of unfortunate aspect. But I mean, again, going back to, there's a quote, and I wish I could credit it. Maybe you can look it up. You know, it says, to the privileged, equality feels like oppression. Okay. And what I mean by that is, again, going to the health privileged, because I feel like that's something that I think a lot of us can can be part of that group. It took us 6 weeks of healthy people having to do sitting at home or wearing a mask or being careful not to touch things or, God forbid, wash your hands, of these rules that were set in place for equality, for the greater whole, for us to all try to be healthy, for us to say, no, fuck this. This is too much. This is a bridge too far. I am not willing to do this because this is too much for me. And what's going on now is it became a partisan issue. It became a issue that you can have a stance against, rather than us as a human race saying we all have to sit there and say, you know what? I don't have any letters after my name that stand for any medical degrees, but we have access to all this information, so I'm going to make my own decisions. And I've decided that, you know what? That risk is worth it for me. So what we're doing is that we are making this where we even know, like you say, on one side, the very far side says this is a hoax. It's not even real.
Which is a lot more people than I'd like to admit, by the way.
On the far other side is obviously the things that this is the most devastating thing that the human planet has ever done, and we're all going to die.
Yes.
But somewhere in this realm where the things start to mix is somebody that sits there and says, I'm okay with what's about to happen, which is fine. I'm okay with that. I respect that position. But the problem is, again, what you're saying is the people that are going to die are collateral damage, which I'm okay with. It's funny. You and I both, we talked about before where you've gone through a weight loss change, right? That's number one killer in America, and cardiovascular disease and all that stuff. They talk about number one, by leaps and bounds. But not one time have somebody saw you at the time when you were thicker, when I was even thicker than I am now, slapped a burger out of my hand and was like, I just saw you. That's the second one you picked up. What are you doing? You're killing yourself.
You're going to die.
You're going to die. Because at one point in time, those freedoms we've determined are rights. Those are things that we need to do.
They became normal.
And so I think that this conversation really lends itself to say that when it really doesn't affect you on a day-to-day, it is a far stretch for you to give up some of your freedoms to balance out somebody else's freedoms.
And that has been, from where I'm sitting, it's the biggest problem we have to solve.
Right.
How do you communicate to people who they're regardless of what happens, this is not changing their little lives, maybe a percentage point or two in the taxes, which nobody fucking cares. Nobody actually gives a shit about that. It's just for the sake of arguing.
Uber wealthy.
Well, very, 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 very wealthy. But I mean in the middle, like,
yes,
people like to
the vast
bullshit
majority.
and make it act like it's about money, man. It's a fucking, y'all spend money on the dumbest shit. I see you every fucking day. We all do. Quit pretending this shit is about money. You spend money on the dumb shit. Like, we as Americans are the stupidest consumer. We're just ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? So the things that you brought, when it became partisan, that point is beautiful to me, because COVID, easy. Everybody, other than like the fucking 2% psychos who were like, this is a hoax, bro. Look at the way the mainstream media is using COVID to control your mind. Everybody else, for the most part, was like, I don't want a bunch of people to die unnecessarily. I understand that this is a very big issue, and I'm going to do my part to try to do what I can. But the second it became political, now it's a fucked point.
I mean, the example I want to give is like that I've thought about. I've had this debate with some people. It was like, let's say a new thing came on, Movid or whatever it is, came on, and it was like, guess what? If you wear black sneakers, have a higher risk of catching it.
Yeah.
And then it just came out, that's just information. And in the very beginning, everyone goes, holy shit, that's weird. And then people stopped wearing black sneakers, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be a segment of people that really identify with that idea and then go, no, this doesn't make any sense. Look at that dude. He's wearing black sneakers. He's not dying.
He's fine.
And then as a statement, you might only wear one pair of black sneakers or have one pair of black sneakers. You might go buy 10. And then wear nothing but black sneakers. It becomes
you've got something to grab onto now.
You got this foothold, and it's a weird thing that happens because, again, it's this kind of this mentality that humans have, that we all try to find people that agree with us and try to find this tribe, trying this identity, that we grasp onto these things really hard. It's like, I ask people all the time, I'm like, is it that difficult? Is it that inconvenient You know what I mean? It's like you literally see, and again, if you're that small percentage that legitimately this is a difficult thing to work, I get it, okay? But I'm just saying we have doctors that are wearing these PPE 12 hours a day on top of a face shield, on top of a 95 mask, on top of this, blah, blah, blah. And we're saying, hey, when you're around other people, wear a mask. And people are like, no.
Fuck you.
This is ridiculous. Why? You know? And so what I'm saying is,
It becomes about other shit.
and I'm not even judging them, because what I'm saying is that what I want them to analyze is, again, the why is that you're saying that this amount of inconvenience bridged too far.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I asked you to,
because where's the line, man?
Like,
It's a slippery slope. What next?
Think about for me to put a sign up that, let's say I had a sign up in the bathroom of my restaurants and say, anybody who takes a shit must wash their hands or I'm not going to let you eat.
Okay.
I would say 99.9% of the people would agree with that. But when somebody reads that, there's some people that the wheels will start to turn and go,
fuck that.
Are my rights being violated? Like,
I'm not washing my fucking hands.
Exactly.
Bro.
There's a part of it. There's some people, and what they might ultimately end up on the side that says, no, that's probably a good idea. But there might be people that are like, who the fuck are you to tell me to do what to do with my hands and my food? If I want to, because that doesn't affect you.
Yeah,
if
but
I want to eat my own
so
shit.
how do you get to that though? Because it's like that's the exact problem I'm trying to face with a lot of my friends who are still in a place where they're like, I don't understand this enough to care.
The thing about it is what you're talking about is empathy. I go always back to empathy. And what empathy is the ability to feel somebody else's emotions, what they're going through without actually experiencing it, right? That's the hardest thing.
But you got to get over that boundary of what these people have. Is
they have to acknowledge
they don't want to fuck with their own shit.
They have to acknowledge it's true. Jane Elliott, I'm sure you've seen some of the videos that I've posted. And so Jane Elliott has the most simple question in the world, which is, she was in a classroom, all white people in the 60s, I believe, when it was filmed. That clip might be in the 70s when I posted it. But anyway, she's been doing this forever. And one of the things she said was, if you like and feel like the way that black people are treated in this country is great, and you would like to be treated the same way, stand up. Nobody in the room stood up. And she says, the fact that nobody's standing up means that you acknowledge that's true and you don't care that you've done nothing about it. Why are you allowing it to be true? That's step one. And that's a very real thing, because that is even hard, because I think we all inherently, again, other than pathological liars and people who stand to gain from lying, I don't think we generally like to lie. I don't think most people do. So I think that's what's difficult for people, is the nervous energy that I have on coming on this show is to say, I don't lie. So what if I say something wrong, right? Because now it's out there.
See?
Right?
This is the first thing that's removed that for me. Where there was a lot, for white people in particular, bro, there was a several year period where I wouldn't have said like, see that black dude over there? I wouldn't have said that because I would have been scared that was racist, because there was something in me that still didn't understand the way racial... It's just an example. It's not the end-all, be-all example. But like you were speaking to earlier, how there's... White people have a negative attached to the word black.
Right.
We don't think we're allowed to call black people black people.
Right.
We don't know what the fuck we're allowed to say.
Right.
We don't know what the God did. And it all goes back to, for the most part, white people, we just look, man, we got taught this fucking very simple-ass version of America that's not what everybody else faces. And like admitting that and coming to terms with it is very difficult.
Well, it's very hard. I mean, it's very hard for men to come to grips with toxic masculinity, male privilege.
True.
It's very hard for
we
us
don't
to
want
do
to admit
that.
These things.
It's very hard to talk about privilege in any sort, because again, it's not, what it boils down to is once you start using these check marks, again, that you have to identify with, that you have no choice. Again, imagine being that race. But just the same thing, these type of things are very difficult to come to grips with. And so when you have that opportunity, and I call it an opportunity because anytime that I have an opportunity to do this, I'll tell you the stage in my life that I'm in that has been simultaneously the most stressful and difficult, but the most enlightening and wonderful, is that I've really started to dive in to try to spend more time consuming things that I don't agree with. I like the Facebook algorithm. We talk about it, whether or not you want to say evil or not. It makes sense.
I do.
Because that makes sense, because you're saying I clicked on, like, the irony of the whole thing is I went on Amazon or Google and started baking fucking bread during the quarantine like everybody else.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden ads started popping up about bread, and bread videos started showing up on fucking YouTube. This algorithm is designed to reward you like a little fucking mouse pellet in a cage hey, look, you like that. You want more of that? Here's another one.
Yeah.
And so
Here's another
the problem about that is that there's a quote, I believe it's Socrates. Again, I'm good at remembering quotes, bad at remembering
the
who said them.
the other one was like, there's too many versions of it. It's not attributed to anybody. The one you had about
Privilege and oppression.
Yeah. To the privileged equality feels like oppression. I couldn't even find a clear-cut answer. So I tried.
Maybe
just
I made
saying
it
I
up.
tried.
But no, this Socrates has a quote that's similar to saying that I've never once. Maybe it's one of those. Plato, Socrates. Don't judge
a
me.
philosophizer.
It's a philosophizer, a smart dude wearing a robe of some sort.
Of course.
He said, "I've never once learned anything from someone that agreed with me." Right. In these echo chambers that we're staying in, that's not healthy either.
Right.
That's not good either, because all it does is reinforce our ego, reinforce something that we already believe is real, and we're just looking for that reaffirmation. And people are doing the same thing. I've spent a lot of time reading opposing views and looking at opposing views, because guess what? When I come to that person and talk, I need to be equipped with what that person knows so that I can address them.
Yes.
Because otherwise, I'm sitting here trying to fight to convince you that I'm right, and that's wrong. I don't know if I'm right. I just have information. I just have data. I have my opinion. There's a discussion between what's right and who's right, and there's two totally different fucking things, okay? And so the thing about it is, for me to try to convince you that I'm right, even though all this data that I've developed, that's the natural thing to do.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, it's not always like that. And so when you have that discussion with somebody, you have to be prepared, because they need to know, and you're better suited for that battle or that debate if I know what you're doing. I mean, that in law, you literally have to have disclosure. Right? You have to sit there and go, I need to see the data that you have, the evidence that you have, so that I can build a proper defense, or vice versa, right? Vice versa.
Right.
Like, that's the case. We've discussed this for hundreds of years, that the more information we have, the more likely we can get to the truth of the matter, right? And the difficult part about it is we have to hold our nose and dive into this data. Otherwise, you're arguing in an echo chamber, and it's pointless. What purpose is that, right?
And I think that's what so many Americans have discovered. And honestly, this is not just a white problem. It's the biggest problem on the white side, because white people have most of the power and money in this country still.
Right.
But it is an all colors problem. We siphon each other off. Our communities are fractured by race and color and mostly economic shit. And it's been this way the whole time the country's existed. Now, there are, of course, examples of that not being the case. But I mean, look, for the most part, that is the way this country operates.
Well, that is the way I think nature operates.
Yeah, but it's problematic for when you're trying to do a society.
Well, that's exactly right. What it boils down to is that anytime you reach an intelligent level of society, then you start to get to the point where it is, again, I've talked about this before, is my head starts to lean towards equal opportunity, but not equality necessarily. And we talk about justice versus equalness, because different levels, there are things that need to be treated differently. And it's going to sound mad Animal Farm George Orwell right now, and I'm not trying to be that way. But what I mean by this is that people have even acknowledged this, meaning there's, like, Chris Rock has a great bit about it that just says, some jobs, you just can't have a bad day.
Yeah.
You can't have a bad day as a pilot. You can't. American Airlines, if you found out that, this is Chris Rock's bit 100%, and he's a genius for this, verbalizing it so beautifully, was if American Airlines announced 98% of our flights land, 2% like to fucking crash every once in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, that's terrible advertising. That's bad. And matter of fact, if that number creeps even incrementally, even by 0.5, even if you saw a graph that over the course of 20 years, that thing has increased, I promise you people would stop flying American Airlines.
Yeah, they'd be fucking scared.
Be terrified. And so what we're trying to say is, again, going back to what we talked about in the very beginning, is that it is okay to hold people in our society that have a bigger burden, that have a higher burden to a higher standard. And that's what's difficult. We are looking for equality and we're looking for equal treatment, not in that way. We're talking about equal opportunity.
Yes.
We're talking about the ability that says that you shouldn't be any more likely to succeed than me versus a little black kid versus a little Asian girl versus a little Mexican girl or a transgender child or anything like that. That's what we're talking about. But the fact of the matter is, I don't want this normal dude to be a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
This person has a huge burden to impact change across the entire fucking world or the country that we have as a whole. You know, that person needs to be higher scrutinized. You know, I agree that it's not fair that this person, like me as a manager of a restaurant or an owner of a restaurant, that I can't get drunk and fucking sleep and wake up late and do stupid shit because guess what? I have a higher standard that I hold myself to or my managers to, because if my bartender came up to me or my manager came up to me and was like, yo, man, why am I getting reprimanded for this? That busser, you know, came in late the other day by 5 minutes. I did that too. What's the big deal? I'm like, well, because when you came in 5 minutes late, you forgot to place the fucking liquor order. And now we don't have liquor to sell. When he came in 5 minutes late, he had 5 minutes more of this work to do. And he finished that at the end of the day. And I did write both of y'all up. Stupid. Like, but that's the thing is that we are very quick to be on the defensive rather than on the connecting side and the positive side to say, yes, I think this job is important. You're not doing a good job at that job. That's the difference. You know, it's not that I'm sitting there going, what, I'm a pilot so I don't get to drink? No, you can drink all you want. Don't fly the plane when you're doing it. You're not allowed to do that. No, you're not allowed to do that while you fly the plane.
Right, but it's
you're not. I don't care what the rule is. I mean, you're just not. I don't want you to do it. You know, yes, you have a right to do anything you want, but you don't have a right to put these 500 people at risk, in danger. Or you, even if you do, you shouldn't. You know, and it's just a weird thing that we don't look at it that way because right then and there, like if you sat there and had that discussion about whatever reason, and a friend Max suggested a book. I haven't read it yet, admittedly. It's called Black Box Thinking, and it talks about the airline industry, about the black box, about how it was invented, about how it was invented, and why, how the airline industry reacts to problems. Meaning, if a plane crashes, it's such a devastating thing, obviously, for every reason, lives lost, business lost, potential, blah, 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 that they, as a community of airline people, go, we need to fix this. And then once we figured it out, the experts, we just distribute all this information to all the airlines. All pilots need to be retrained on this new rule. All planes need to have this new piece of equipment that now measures wind shear. Or, hey, guys, the frozen goose thing that we have to fire into engines to make sure they can survive bird. Like all of that, these are major changes in policy that happen like that because the concept that this happened is so dire that we as a civilization say that's unacceptable. We can't have this situation constantly exist unless we're okay with this happening all the time.
Right.
And then we jump on it. But that doesn't happen in every industry. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you know, and anybody who's read the book, you know, chime in. It's really, they talk about it from a medical side, which is saying that the medical profession as a whole hasn't unified in that way. Meaning when a doctor makes a mistake or something like that, the tendency right now is such a litigious society as that we have, the tendency is for there to be little pockets of repair rather than, oh my God, this is what we figured out. That
used to be the problem in like the 60s and 70s with serial killers between like they could never catch any of these fuckers because none of the police departments were communicating with each other.
And they still kind of don't. I mean, even to the point now where they talk about a joint task force and the officers that I've spoken to are like, yeah, this is a very feudal level of enforcement because each department has its own rules. Each chief can implicate certain rules. Each state can do it certainly differently than each city, can do it differently than each county. And these are all things that, again, are, in my opinion, what we're talking about is fundamentally changing the way we think about problems and trying to look at it from as many angles as possible. And I think that's very difficult, because the difficult part about it is sometimes it's difficult to ask a question that you don't necessarily want to hear the answer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Very much so.
And that's the question, right? That's the question you have to ask. And I think that most people don't do that. Like I said, most people don't hold their nose and do it. It takes me 10 times longer to read the news now, because anytime I see something,
You gotta go get
I
all
gotta
the
go
angles.
vet it. I gotta go vet it from 7 sources, because if I look at it and I go written by Associated Press or written by this person, and then I go, well, Google this, and then boom, first 5 articles. Guess what? They just reposted that person's article.
Yeah.
So that person it's this kind of echo chamber
Oh my God.
where they're quoting this person's quote that quoted this person's quote.
Yes.
So now I've got to go page 9 of the Google to find the actual quote that person wrote.
And it turns out it's like about some other
It's
shit.
got 7 different other states on it. So it's different pages on there. And so for me, that is singly the most difficult thing. We had a conversation about every time Stone Age, Bronze Age, Copper Age, they talk about these as monumental changes normally in technology, that whoever mastered that technology ruled that era,
Right.
right? First person to figure out how to throw a rock and kill somebody instead of fists, they ruled.
They took that bitch over, yeah.
That person came at me. Well, I found out how to smelt steel. What are you going to do with that rock? Pop. And I'm going to stab you with that. Boom, boom, boom. As it got further, faster, stronger, whatever. We're in the information age now. The way that anybody who knows how to wield this power is going to rule situation. And it's going back and forth. I said this right now. Our situation right now, our buttons are so big. Our triggers are so big that anybody can press them.
Yeah.
That's the difficult part. And that's what's so easy. When I was at the protest, not this past Sunday, the Sunday before, literally pulled some kid out by the collar of his shirt, not even thinking about my own safety, because I don't know how crazy this person was breaking shit, was breaking down a barricade, you know? And I sit there and I pulled him by his shirt like a child. And he kind of was a child. I mean, I don't know how old he was, but, you know, I'm a big dude, 6'5", right? And I was sitting there and I pulled him aside and I was like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, what is this doing for the cause? What are you doing right now? You know? Like what we're doing right now, I said, do you realize that barricade was put up to keep that traffic from running over us? You know?
Trying to keep us safe.
And I was like, what are you doing? I go, if this is the way that you're expressing, fine, but I need to know, because it looks like you're just fucking shit up. You know? And then I go, guess what? Your skinny ass, I'm twice your size. I'm going to be a target. I'm a big brown dude.
They're going to shoot your ass with a fucking beanbag.
I'm an
way
easier
before they
target.
Hit you. Yeah, but
Yes.
way before they hit him.
And I was like, what are you doing? And but again, I don't know if he was legitimately angry. I don't know if he was just some kid fucking around. I don't know what it would, but I'll tell you what, at the right time, if someone caught that footage, it could be spun in 90 different ways.
And that's the thing. I think the failure
It's information.
to realize that, I mean, you just put very well what I've been trying to express in so many words for a couple weeks now in terms of the news. Because what I've been finding is, you know, let's just say, like, you make the assumption a lot of white people grow up on Fox News, okay? And that's a safe assumption. A lot of white people grow up on Fox News. If you go watch Fox News right now talking about the dude that got shot at Wendy's over the weekend, you're going to get a completely different story than if you go check CNN and get a story about the dude who got shot at that Wendy's over the weekend. Now, if you go to MSNBC, you're going to get somewhere in between. But every single one of them carries a slant to the degree that you are no longer even getting the regular ass story or the real story.
Right.
You're getting this weird, emotional, charged politically version of it that's feeding into a narrative. And I was laughing yesterday with my dad because I said, you know what taught me about narratives? The NBA. Because season after season after season, the fucking media tells everybody in America that James Harden is ruining the game of basketball, that he's the worst thing that's ever happened. They used to do this with AI too, Allen Iverson. He's a ball hog. He shoots too much. He's never had any playoff success. He's a choker. None of these things are true, of course. But if you told them over and over and over and over, statistically, they are false.
Yeah.
Statistically, you cannot argue with the fact that he is one of the most prolific offensive and now above average defensive players in the history of basketball. He might be the best scorer to ever have touched a basketball statistically, by the time it's all said and done, if you look at things from a clear lens, not counting like the fact that Wilt Chamberlain was fucking 7 feet tall playing a bunch of like
with no 3 points, no 3-second rule.
Totally different ball game. Like it's a whole. I get all that, but like statistically, the media narrative, the narrative that people latch onto and they just love it, and it's like it's fun to hate on James Harden, and he's got a beard, and it's like fuck Houston, so like people latch onto it, and year after year after year, he puts up the numbers he puts up, but it does not matter because the narrative is more fun, and for white people, this entire situation is that.
And the foothold, and again, like I said, and I go back to the idea of how difficult it is to literally admit, I didn't know that.
I was wrong.
I was wrong. Or, oh man, that's new. It's so hard to say. I mean, think about how many relationships are ruined because of that. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, you're talking about most of
relationships.
Yeah, and you're talking about literally that concept. I mean, I remember right in the very, very beginning, and that's me, my general, and you can see on any of my social media, anytime I have a debate, the tendency is for me to never really, I don't like gotcha shit. I just like to provide data. And I'm like, this is data. I need you to come up with your own.
Same team.
I just need you to figure out what you feel about this, but I need you to know all the data. For instance, one of the first times I posted something about it, somebody was immediately jumping on and posted this video about this guy. They're like, what about this Dallas bar owner that was murdered in the streets?
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody had to watch that, unfortunately.
And I said, okay, I saw that. It was heartbreaking. But the first thing I did was dig. I didn't share it. I didn't do anything to it.
Immediate reaction. You didn't go straight to Twitter, put up the link, and post your immediate thoughts?
I dug about it.
I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something about Twitter that's really dope about this. But then, so this thing goes, turns out, less than a day later, the guy was not the bar owner. He was a bar patron. He was drunk and trying to protect his favorite bar. He had a machete that he had fashioned into a giant broadsword that looks like the Braveheart sword and was chasing people around the streets
to try to get him away from this bar.
To get him away from the bar.
Yeah, eventually you're going to get your ass beat doing
what
that.
I'm saying is he even says that was a really dumb idea. I was drunk, bad mistake, but that was me. Does he deserve to get beat down in the street?
No.
I don't know. That's not my point.
But the full story needs to be there.
I'm just saying talk about the full story because that narrative is different. Local bar patron drunkenly tries to protect bar with this machete, gets beat down in the street. That is a storyline that A, I could never make up. B, it allows there to be real conversation about whether or not this is okay.
Here's what kills me about that shit. The fucking bar owner thing or patron, whatever ended up, by the way, I did not know it ended up being a patron. This is mine, but this, my gut instinct is to scream at people. It doesn't fucking matter because you're treating the symptoms. But bro,
Right.
The riots and the looting are a result of black people being killed by police. If you fix black people being killed by police, you no longer have this drunk moron with a machete in the street getting his ass kicked by looters or protesters or whatever the fuck.
But here's the thing, Ross, I want to tell you, you got to let go of that because what it comes down to is these are micro diseases and micro symptoms. And what it boils down to,
too many.
It is. It's heavy and it's exhausting. And what I'm talking about is the two things that you got to decide is A, is this person important enough for you to spend this time talking to? Which is true. It's really like there's people that I go, you know what?
Peace.
Unfriend, peace.
Yeah.
Or unfollow me, you know?
Sure, you kind of got to pick your spots now.
I care about this person and I care about your philosophies in life and you mean a lot and I think that you're a good person and I want to have this debate with you. 3, did I say A, B, 3? Probably.
Who cares?
Anyways, thirdly, you go in here and we talk about it here and then let people decide their own. You have a platform. It's an opportunity for you to talk to people. But I think it's very wrong. And I think this is where everybody makes the mistake is that we dismiss. There's some people that this might be the most difficult thing they've ever dealt with. And that's what's making this thing very hard. Think about the people angry right now, maybe even the white people that are protesting for the first time or something.
Sure.
This might be the first time they've ever felt that feeling. Right? I talked about this a lot with my people of color, friends of people of color. I was like, it takes a lot to offend me now. I got a thick ass skin. You can't just call me a name. Like, it doesn't even stop me in my day. Like, it doesn't even ruin my day. Like, you know what I mean? If somebody just called me a racist slur, I'd just be like, like, come on, you gotta be more creative than that.
Sure.
You're talking about whatever, throw some chopsticks at me. Who cares? Like, you know what I mean? Whatever, I don't care. Like, it happens so much that doesn't matter. I mean, I'll tell you, the first time in the beginning of all this that it stung for a little bit because it has been so long was at the beginning of COVID, and people avoided me in the grocery store.
Oh, fuck off.
Yeah.
Dude.
And
it's funny because I have a black neighbor and an Asian neighbor, and I have noticed, this is fucked up. I have noticed that, like, all my people are in the street all day, every day now. Motherfuckers don't go to work. They just walk their dogs and go jogging. Mm-hmm. And it's everybody in your whole neighborhood and people who've never gone outside before are outside. So you see everybody. Excuse me, weed cough. But my black neighbor and my Chinese neighbor, nobody is ever anywhere near these fucking people on the street, dude. And it is, seriously, I didn't notice with the Chinese lady until the COVID stuff. And I don't know if it was like.
And to be fair, this is a self-perpetuating prophecy, right? Because I didn't interview that person. I didn't talk to that person. It just felt that way. I was walking down the aisle. The person saw me come in. We made eye contact, turned around and left. Or I was walking down the aisle. It's a wide-ass aisle. We could have easily passed each other, and that person moved further away from me.
Sure.
I mean, it's just, these are things that as the only reason I noticed was because I noticed, but it could be because I'm noticed because I'm sensitive about it, which is not wrong either. But what I'm saying is that generally speaking, it takes a lot for me to feel that again. It's like a scar.
To feel the pain.
To feel anything. Yeah, if I have a scar and I cut it and I have 9 inches of scar tissue above my head, you're not going to feel a little tap on it.
Sure.
I got to cut through all that shit. And so I think the difficulty is that some of these people have pristine, nothing going on in this world. They might have other scars, but then when they come and talk about this, and the first time they are forced to feel that, and I'll tell you, there's a video I need to show you. There's this guy named Moody that talks about what happened with George Floyd, and it was something that hit me, and 2 things hit me about it. Number 1 was when it zoomed out, and I saw the Asian cop right there. It hit. It hurt. I was like, what the fuck? What are you doing? It hit me because, again, as an Asian person who grew up in a very predominantly black community, in a community that obviously that I embrace and I love and I consume a lot of black culture. Obviously, I'm a hip hop head, it hit me that I was like, I was just like, why you, right? Secondly, was how calm this person was. That was what hit me the most, was because every other time that this has happened, that I could tell, was a struggle.
And some kind of panic shit, crazy chaos.
Which doesn't change the racist part of it.
No.
It doesn't change, and we can unpack that if we want to. But the fact was, this person, the reason why it was so impactful to me was how calm it was and how long it took.
Yeah.
It's because was this person almost posed for the camera. Was almost like I wasn't doing anything
wrong. Hand in the pocket. Yeah.
That literally was the most impactful thing to me, because that was the systematic part of the situation. Take that person out of it. It's like this. If I watch you in a burglar mask come into my restaurant, sneak through, turn off the cameras, take some shit out and steal some shit, I'm going to assume that you knew that it was wrong, right? But if you walked through my front door, waved at the camera, opened up the drawer, took some money out and left, I'm going to assume you thought it was okay. And that's the difference.
Yes.
Is in this case, what's impactful about it was that this person
might as well have been smiling at the camera and waving.
Didn't even think for a second that this was wrong.
That was the part that fucked me up. It wasn't necessarily the cop's reaction, because frankly, at this point, I had no reason to believe that any cop that would allow someone like this was there's another issue with these police. But that shit fucked me up. Just the amount of time, the amount of the fact that they knew they were being filmed and they didn't change anything.
That's right.
Was crazy to me.
But you see, and this is where I'm going to break it down into where this is a constant struggle from the people in power and the people not in power, the people with privilege and people without, because we've been in rooms of guys.
Yeah.
that have said some bullshit ass shit about women
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't get slapped the taste out their mouth, and we probably should have.
Sure.
We've been in situations where we knew people who said some stuff about this person, and we didn't stand up for that. Most of them were not caught on camera, and if it was, we'd be embarrassed.
Absolutely.
And the thing about it is this: that's exactly what we talk about when we have systematic and institutionalized oppression. Is that when you have a situation where this particular member of society, in what way, feels that they have a right to do this, and then that we either are saying we agree
Mm-hmm.
or we say no, right? I mean, it is. That's just one of those things, and it depends. And again, we woke up on 9/12 and all started having to take shoes off at the airport,
Right.
or whatever day it was.
Yeah,
I know
you
it was
know.
quick as fuck, and I knew that it was in a matter of short ass time.
Oh, yeah. It was within a couple weeks. The whole airport was different.
I
Bro.
was like, because that wasn't a thing. If you talk to somebody who died in the 80s, that died in the 90s, and goes like, what the hell are y'all doing?
The airport's fucking crazy now,
Yeah,
bro. Y'all got
exactly.
security. It used to just be like you danced onto any plane you wanted. You didn't even need a fucking ticket.
Yeah, you could get on wrong planes.
Smoking cigarettes in the air and shit. Like,
Yeah, I mean, and I'm telling you, and what I mean by that is, fundamentally speaking, like, change happens when enough of that creates this tipping point where we all sit there and go, that's not right. And I think that what made this thing different was that you sat here and said, what about this is different? And I said, because now the mental gymnastics that you have to do is Olympic level.
they become way more difficult.
Right. Because the old one, you sit there, you watch the news, Eric Garner, he was a big guy, take 5 cops. He was a blah, blah, blah. He was this way, he was that way, whatever reason you're trying to justify it, or whatever. Tamir Rice, oh, well, he looked scary. He was wearing a hoodie, you know what I mean? Whatever it was. Like you're sitting there, talking about, sorry, that was Trayvon. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes. There was always something you could find.
And it was just at the cusp. And then you said that, and then you felt free, and then you ran away. Now, the difficulty with this one is you're like,
Fuck.
well, hold on. Let me dig on this person's life.
Well, which is why it
Whatever.
gets so easy for all these people, too, to then make it political and make it about this or that because you don't want to face the original thing, which is just that this man was killed as a result of the color of his skin. If he had been white and in the same situation, this would not, in all likelihood, have gone down the same way.
But here's the difficult part about it also, is that in moments of life and death, just like COVID, you can't prove the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the hard part.
Fucking ass.
There's a quote that I said that was posted, and I think it was Fauci, that said the problem with this whole thing is if what we're saying works, it's going to look like an overreaction, and if what we're saying doesn't work, we're fucked.
Yeah.
And that's the craziest paradox that I've ever been a part of, because it's just like when I talk to, like, I have a friend of mine who's in the security business and says that he has to deal with this with his clients all the time, because they would be like, hey, I need to hire y'all for this big party I'm throwing. We need 10 security guards, and they're expensive. And then next year they go, all right, well, last year we didn't have any incidents, so why don't we just do 6 security guards this year? And then you're kind of like, well, maybe it didn't happen because we had 10 last year instead of 6. We don't know. You don't know until you test it.
Right.
And that's the fucked up part, because when you test shit like this, bad shit happens.
Yes.
And in the matters of public health, right? These are the things. This is why medicine is difficult. This is whatever, because the only way you can test it is by testing it. And so this is why research is important. And this is why conversations like this are important, because we have to be philosophical about this, or else, because in real life application, it's really hard. I was joking about it the other day. I was like, I would love to be able to just force this empathy upon people, like Jen Elliott, because I had this conversation about, we had our first instance of somebody coming up and refusing to wear a mask
At the restaurant?
at the bar.
Oh, okay, at the bar.
And I was like, I get it. And our rules are relatively, I'm like, look, just wear them in public spaces. If you're in your circle, you've already decided that, hey, between the 5 of y'all don't care. Whatever it is, that's fine. But just when you're walking around, just to
have
be
your fucking mask
have your mask on. And the guy was arguing back and forth, basically saying, they don't mean anything. It doesn't matter anyways. This is a hoax, blah, blah, blah. And I just wait. And for a minute, I was just like, I wish I could just not be the proprietor and just go and just take off my mask and just go, man, it really means a lot that you said that. Can I get a hug? Because, like, ever since I got tested positive for COVID, like last week, like it just really like, it's tough, man, you know, and I can't breathe through this mask. It's real hard. And, you know, just cough on them a sec, you know, and just be like, man, it's so hard to, you know, this mask really just holds my coughs in. And can I give you a hug? Can you hug me? Can I get a hug?
Yeah.
You know, I'm so glad you said that, you know, and to see what his reaction was, because at that moment you're forcing him to go,
okay, never mind. I'm for the masks.
Right. You need to, but I don't want, you know what I mean? Like and again, it's just one of those things where I was just like, look, man, I don't want to argue with you. I have to manage the expectations of everyone in this room. Can you just do me a favor then?
All of that shit is funny as hell to me, because it's like, it's the combination of everything on top of each other. It's the COVID, the economic fallout, oil and gas. Being in Texas, it's a huge, huge part of the problem in the economically. And then, of course, George Floyd and us now, however you want to look at it, spiraling into a racial crisis here in the United States. Like, all that's stacked on top
that's been
of each
around.
other.
Well, we're just bringing people into the fray.
Yeah. It's like you've now brought in a massive chunk of the population who has either been on the sidelines or just actively fucking not even watching.
Right.
You've got people on the sidelines who weren't even looking before. You've got people now in the game who were on the sidelines. Like, we've taken a step in some fucking direction.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about Dave Chappelle's YouTube thing before we leave, before we run out of time. I know, obviously, it's titled 846, the amount of time that the officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck until he died. And it's obviously not a comedy routine. It's not a special. People keep calling it a special. I'm like, bro, it's Dave doing one show that they recorded and then realized they needed to put out. And it's not even a show. It's literally just him speaking from the heart for the most part about the situation that's unfolded over the past couple months. I know you know Dave personally, so it's interesting to me to get this perspective from you. I mean, you've hung out with the guy a couple times. However, I don't know y'all's relationship that well. But what did you think about seeing him basically decide because his point was, look, it's a movement for the streets, right? People are yelling out, Don Lemon wants black celebrities to come out and lead the charge. It's like, well, dude, they're already doing it. And I understand that, but ironically, he's also actually doing the thing that. What was your takeaway?
In true Dave fashion, I'll tell you, he's one of the most brilliant people that I've honestly had the honor, privilege of being friends with. And I think that his evolution from, and again, I don't know if he's always been this way, but obviously you could see his genius in his comedy. But as he's progressed, and he mentions this in the special where he's like, have you not watched my comedy? I've been talking about this forever. Because he doesn't really pass on as much of the tropes as they were. He's not one of those comedians that just goes for the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Meaning, this is easy. White people say this and black people say that. He digs in. I mean, one of his most recent specials ends on the story about Emmett Till. I mean, come on, like the odds of that putting the idea of a comedian putting that at the end of their special is very powerful,
dude,
right?
Episode 1, Season 1, Chappelle Show.
Oh,
white black supremacists.
Yeah. Clayton Bigsby.
Fucking episode 1.
And so I think that this is his voice, and I think in his true fashion, he points out, and because what is comedy if not surprise and irony and perspective, right? So he points out the craziness that is, who gives a shit what celebrities think when it comes to important matters,
social issues.
But he also realized that he himself has a platform that obviously millions of people will see, and secondly, real life experience, because he can speak on what it is to be a black man in America. And I think at the end of the day, I think maybe that's why it took him a little bit to come out, because he's very careful with his words, because he realizes that. One of the reasons he and I talked about before about locking up the phones, which I was like, in the very first time it happened, before I knew him, I went to a couple of his shows and they started locking up phones. I was like, it felt weird. Obviously, it was like, taking away my fucking my boobie. No, it was like it was my security, right? It was like this thing that I'm just like, ugh.
Everybody in the show is touching their pocket every 10 minutes.
And then you realize that, well, a lot of he was like, well, it allows me to be more free with my words because I'm working through this, right? He's working through the material. He's working through his stuff and
Right.
seeing the reaction, engaging. I mean, I'm telling you, being able to see his same show multiple times, even one night after another while he's working his material, I mean,
It's crazy.
It is the equivalent of a chef adjusting 2 pinches of salt, 3 sprigs of rosemary instead of 1. I mean, he's methodical with it. And I mean, his timing, everything. And again, I think it happens second nature. Again, he's just that good.
Yeah.
But all comedians have this mind where they go out and they take their thoughts, chew it up to digest it, and spit it back out, you know? And I think that his point, beyond that of his very poignant, obviously, reiterations about how this happened, his point is trying to provide a perspective, like what I talked about, of maybe here's another way you can look at it, so maybe you can understand.
Yes,
right?
That was the takeaway for me.
Right. The whole thing was maybe you can understand. Like the whole idea to try to point out the ridiculousness of what's happening, or about how blind people are, to point that stuff out to you, and maybe you'll recognize that. Maybe the irony of allowing, you know, Drew Brees a platform, but not LeBron. The analogy of this, like any example, and everyone is just grasping at straws, trying to send as many analogies as we're trying to convince people. All right, you don't understand what that's like. Oh, I got one.
Yes.
How about this? How about this? How about that?
But I feel like every single person who gives it a shot, like, look, there's been a lot of people shaming people like me for virtue signaling, right?
Mm-hmm.
White people who are saying, I'm not okay with this. And then other white people who are okay with it are like, you're just virtue signaling. Good for you. Everybody knows you're a good guy now. And it's like, God damn it, you fucking idiot. No. I don't give a shit what you think about me. It's not about me. It's about simple right and wrong. Like, there's just somewhere along the way, things have gotten so complicated. And Dave's message had a way of simplifying it again for me. So it's like, I think at this point, the more versions of this discussion we can have from the more celebrity, I don't give a fuck who it is. Bring them out, dude. Everybody needs to throw in at this point. There's no more like, what does your perspective mean? Fuck your perspective. Or like, why should I listen to you? No. Everybody that says something, Dave, that's probably another couple 100,000 people who it clicks for. I'm serious, man. I mean, do you have any idea how impactful that is? If even 10,000 white people watch that special and go, fuck, I get it. I get the anger.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, I understand.
Yeah.
That's a massive difference.
Yeah.
So of course he has to, like, that's the thing where, and yes, he's certainly more than allowed to take his time. I thought it was interesting because before I watched it, so many people were lauding it as some kind of, as groundbreaking. And what I found myself, and maybe it's just as a result of I had already consumed so much of this stuff the past few weeks that I was just like, I'm already so
saturated.
I'm drowning in it. So I didn't find any of it to be particularly groundbreaking. It was more of Dave being like, yes, also I obviously fucking agree.
Right, the streets have already spoken.
But the beginning part of it, when he started to get emotional, and you could tell he was getting angry, and that this was going to be different than any Dave Chappelle thing you'd watched, I almost started crying because I've watched him do so many shows, and I've never understood fundamentally what it must be like to be Dave Chappelle. Obviously, I've idolized him as a comedian, as an entertainer. I believe he's among the greatest to ever do it, if not the. But every single one of his jokes and specials before George Floyd died missed in a way, because I didn't have a level of understanding that I do now. And that realization, when he started to get angry, watching a dude as a black dude that has entertained me for hundreds and hundreds of hours of my life, and that probably hasn't had to experience any of the incredibly difficult versions of this racism in many, many years as a result of his now position.
You'd be surprised.
Yes, probably, but you know what I'm saying, man.
I do.
Dave getting racial injustice is different than George Floyd getting racial injustice.
What we're talking about is he mentioned that, where the cop pulled him over the day before. The week before.
What the fuck?
And so the thing about it is the groundbreaking part that he said that I loved, beside the whole thing, I really thought it was brilliant, was
Well, the celebrity part too for me was like a bing.
Well, the part where he says, "We didn't choose him, you chose him," and that was profound to me. This is what made me think about that. When a line is drawn in the sand, it doesn't matter. Somebody else drew that line. You're automatically on one side or the other.
Yeah, I hate that shit.
There's no such thing. You can't be standing on that line. When you draw the line, physically, just imagine this in your head. Somebody draws a line in the sand on the beach that goes from shore to fucking coast, right? You're standing on one side or the next. That line is either drawn in front of you or behind you. And so now you're there.
Move.
So then when I ask you, are you okay with standing on this side of the line? Do you say, yeah, the side's nice? Or, wait, why are you over there? And I go, well, this side, we have food. You ain't got food on that side.
Well, some of us are going, holy shit, there's a line.
That's right. And that's exactly the point. And what I mean by that is that each time this happens, this is what happens. I mean, I had a conversation with one of my friends who, you know, again, I respect a lot. And he just had a baby boy, you know, less than a year ago. And he was out there, and I mean, he's a black dude. And I was like, I didn't ask him like why he was there. Obviously, I was just saying, what, you know, how's it going? How you been? And what he said was, he was like, you know, when my son grows up and hopefully looks back and asks me about 2020, if this really started something or if this was something, am I going to say, if he was like, hey, what did you do, Dad? What were you like? And he was like, I didn't do shit.
I was at home watching fucking Netflix.
Or if he says, nah, I was there. I was doing something. I did what I could, you know? And that's the real question. The real question is to sit there and say, are you okay with being on that side of history? Are you okay with that? And again, this applies if you want to take this and air it on some news broadcast and take this snippet and say, take that, and that motivates you to do anti-mask shit and say, it's the same shit. I'm okay with that too. You can say, yo, I stood up for what I believed in, and this is what I believe in, but that's what I want you to do. Don't lie to yourself. You can lie to me. Don't lie to yourself. Don't sit there and say that I don't believe this or I don't see this, and you're trying to find footholds and to justify your decision. But the fact of the matter is that line was drawn for us. The line was drawn for you. You know what I mean? And so you're on this side already. It might be the right side. Maybe it was. Maybe it is. But you have to decide if you want to be on that side.
It was funny watching a lot of white people, you know, step one is acknowledge the line. And then step two is to make that decision you're speaking to, which is like, am I cool with my spot in this situation?
Yeah.
And if the answer I think time and time again, you're right. Every time one of these happens, more people answer, nope, I'm not cool with it. But a lot of people still say, yep, no, it's been a couple weeks. I'm ready to go back to living normal. I don't know. Fuck it. I'm still a Republican or whatever. Like, or fuck it. Like,
it happened with COVID.
Yes.
We just all decided it was over.
We just cycle on, and well, now we're going to get to decide that it's probably not. But it's just fucking crazy to me to see. And this is the thing that I struggle with too. We don't have time to get into this side of it, but it's the
Told you
thing
it's gonna be 2 hours.
With the line in the sand. There's things in this life where I see the line and I go, okay, I understand the situation. I need to move my ass to the other side, or I need to bring more people over onto the side with me, or whatever. But when it comes to politics, I struggle with this because I don't want to go to either of the fucking sides.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it gets really difficult for me to like figure out how do I address this as an American and like as an educated American citizen. And this is a thing that I'm going to begin talking about more and more in the coming weeks on this show. Is the things that like, you know, I spoke to, bro, it's never changed a fucking thing for middle class white people who gets elected. Well, as a result, none of us know how to vote anymore. And none of us really give a shit or know how politics work or understand how, like, I can name a couple of people who rep me. Yep. Dude, that's about it. I don't know what the fuck they do on a daily basis. I don't know how long they have their jobs for. I don't remember the shit they taught me in fucking third grade about how we elect people and what the fuck. That's part of my white privilege, man. I didn't have to worry about that shit. It's never had fuck all impact on my life.
Yep.
Now I have to go learn this shit because it fucking matters to other people. And I care about other people because I'm not an asshole. And at its simplest place, that's all this really is. Do you give a shit about other people, or are you an asshole who only cares about yourself? And in the case of the latter, it's like, fine. But in the former, CK and I having this conversation is relatively easy, right? Neither one of us is black. We both have relatively cushy lives at this point. Now, what we've been through in our past and whatever the fuck to get here is a different story. You have to have the difficult conversations with people, but you have to have them from a place, and this is the thing that was the main reason I was excited to have you on today, and it's something that I think you communicated very well. You cannot come at people from and attack them. If you make white people on the wrong side of the line feel attacked, which I guarantee you they already feel, as I know it sucks, I know it's not fair, I know your response is to say, how could white people feel like it's, but I'm telling you, they feel attacked. And if you have these fuckers scared, they will not help you.
Well, okay, so let me unpack that for a second. I don't disagree with you, but I think the important thing about this is to look at it, and again, logically minded. It's not that you can't. You have a right to. If you want to get
We've been doing that though. And
there's some people, right? It's how you want to get the best results, and some people that will get results. Some people won't watch the news until something's on fire. Remember that? There's a comedian that talks about that. Every time I look on the screen, I see a green city, I pay attention because that means somebody's shooting shit at night. You know what I mean?
Right.
He goes,
"Oh, you mean the night?
Yeah,
the
night vision, right?"
Bro,
Because if there's a green city,
something's
going down, right? And so that conversation really is whether or not you want the best results. I mean, again, to go back to where I consider myself is my lane, I have employees that are 18 and I have employees that are 55.
Mm-hmm.
I don't speak to them the same way. I don't. It's stupid to think that I could, and it's stupid to think that I should, nor should I have policy that does the blanket policy should be there, but individualized policy, meaning how I manage these people differently, is different because I want to maintain the best results that I can for this person, right?
So you handle them case by case, sort of, is what you mean?
I try to.
Okay.
Right. And this doesn't come, and again, this is coming from a positive side, meaning I want to get the most out of this person and I want to give the most to this person. I'm not talking about disciplinary. Disciplinary tends to be very equal. Give you an example. We used to have, right when we first started, smoke breaks, right?
Sure.
People want to get smoke breaks, and then the disciplinary action was, hey, look, if you came back, you smelled smoke, you're supposed to Febreze yourself, sterilize, wash your face, do some mouthwash, brush your teeth, and all this other shit. And it got to the point where my non-smoking employees were like, well, I'm going to start smoking so I can take a break.
Yep.
You know? And then I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. No more smoke breaks. Nobody gets it. That's period. I said, look, that's not fair. It's not fair to everybody. That's a disciplinary thing. I said, but in general, where I'm sitting there going, all right, this college kid. So this schedule is written in such a way that maybe not conducive for someone's morning classes, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go take the extra step and make sure that when I write this schedule, that this person doesn't work late on the nights before he has morning classes, because I want to maximize this person's productivity in his own life and productivity at work. Vice versa, this person has children. So maybe at lunch, this person needs to go pick up his kids from school. So guess what? Normally our shift ends at lunch at 4 p.m. He has to get out by 3 o'clock. So we agreed that I'm going to let you get out of work at 3 o'clock, but you can come in an hour earlier, get set up. And that's a exception, not the rule. But these are ways that I feel get the best result out of things. Again, this is different. You and I having a conversation with thousands of people potentially listening.
Sure.
We're doing giant broad strokes. And all it is, I'm just giving you my opinion. I'm not even saying I'm right. I'm just saying this is what I think, and this is how I deal with it.
So you think it's on a healing and on like a communicative level, it's a person by person.
It's what lane you're in.
Okay.
You know, I think that we need Malcolm X and we need Martin Luther King.
Yeah, that's been a weird thing to see, man.
Right?
All these clips from like old school MLK or X or comedians or entertainers.
And those are the two famous ones because that's how we've distilled history down into. There's dozens more.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Theirs was it was the dichotomy of like peaceful protest.
But
versus...
we're talking about this is what we were taught.
Yeah.
Again, goes down to that, meaning we never took it upon because it wasn't valuable. Like if I asked you who's the name of the last emperor of China, like it is not part of your history. Your parents might not have taught that to you, and I don't blame you for it. But now The question is, if you really wanted to get to know me, would you learn that? Or why would you do this? Or blah, 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 so on and so forth, whatever you want to say.
Sure.
Like, you know what I'm talking about? It's important to me. I remember it was a big deal. Like, for instance, back in high school, when I was dating someone, and she obviously, not obviously, you don't know who I dated, but she didn't speak Chinese. And she was like, she wanted to learn how to say hello and goodbye in Chinese so she could say hello and goodbye to my grandmother. It meant a lot to me because at that moment, you don't need to. She understands the word hello and goodbye. She lives in America for this many years. She don't speak fluent English, but she can definitely say hello and goodbye. But she was trying to relate, to connect. It wasn't contrived. It wasn't anything. It was that level. And so for me, like I said, one of the most poignant memes that I've seen, and I hate that we're in a meme culture now, but memes are very informative. One was like, I don't care what you're doing. And they listed off all these things: marching, protesting, picketing, blah, 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 everything. It goes, find your lane and step on the gas. So find out what in the world it is that you're doing. And if that's just you talking to your neighbor because your neighbor is 86 years old, but you want to change that person's mind, you want to spend time with them, do it. If your lane is speaking to 1,000 people, do it. If your lane is saying that I want to change a policy at work, do it. But don't just do nothing. That's the part that I'm bothered about, is, like I said, is that to me, the issue is not so much that you can attack people, do it, but realize that you're coming for a fight. And if you want to fight and you're a fighter, do it. Figure it out. That's how you want to do, but that's the fight that you got to ready, and then you got to train yourself for the fight and get ready for that fight.
Oh, fuck,
you know? But if you're not wanting to fight and you want to have this conversation, then have that conversation. If I'm a pacifist, that's where my lane is. And so what I do is I take things offline when things start to get contentious and people start to get embarrassed, and I realize that, hey, I'm embarrassing this person because I'm really calling this person out. I sit there and I reach them offline and sit there and go, look, I'm going to stop this conversation offline. If you want to have this communication with us, keep having it. Or, if you want to keep having it online, I'm going to continue to embarrass you. And I said, I'm fine with that. I said, but I'm giving you the out. Yeah. Because that's what I want to get the best out of this. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to win the argument. I don't. I told you before, I think I've said this in previous interviews, episodes, where I was the dude that invited Jehovah's Witnesses into my house and Mormons and stuff that people came up because I was like, oh, you got the truth?
Bring it in.
Bring it in. Come on in. Have a seat. You want a coffee?
Let's fucking hear it.
Let's hear it. Because guess what? I've been going every Sunday to this place. They told me they got the truth. So what's going on?
Yeah.
And I want to know. And at the end of that conversation, I go, nah, I don't believe that. Thanks, bye. Or, holy shit. You know what I mean? It's one or the other. And that was what I fully got out of that conversation. I don't want to be right. I don't have any need to be right. All this conversation right now, like I said, the worst thing in the world right now is this weird juxtaposition of viral culture, no pun intended with what's going on, and this decision of like clout and attention, because you're posting things quickly and whatever to get attention and to get to see those likes click up and sit there like because some people agree with you and you're like, I feel good. I'm justified. I'm right.
Endorphins.
And I'm like, that's not my intention at all. Who gives a flying fuck about that? All I want to do is provide information, and I want to have this discussion and to get closer to the truth. What I wanted to say before I forget is there's a thing on Twitter that just announced today, I think, that new policy was before you're allowed to share an article, there's an algorithm that checks if you opened it.
That's very
helpful.
And
they'll literally say, would you like to read this before you share it? That's the only question. It's a yes or no question. I promise you there's going to be people backlashing against that. And what's funny about it is at its core, who would disagree with that?
Yeah, I've asked that question about 40 things in the past 2 months.
I find it that I have to preface it. Like I said, black box thinking. I have to say, I haven't read it. I want to say that because if I misquote it or say something stupid, I want to be able to go back and go, I told you I didn't read it. I'm saying that one of my best friends read it and he told me about this and this was a synopsis of his synopsis.
Sure.
But people can just go and share an article after reading this much about it.
Just the headline, probably.
Not even maybe. The headline that gets automatically generated from the fucking link. And then be able to say it and say that I'm okay with everything. Because literally it could be agree. And the last sentence go, fuck puppies, I hate puppies, I want them all to die. And then you're going to be like, you agree with this guy? And we're like, yeah. And you're like, you even agree to this part? And you send that clip and they're going like, holy shit, I didn't even know I was at the end of it. And that's the thing. It's like, yo, man, that's all I'm asking you to do is arm yourself. Get yourself with this data, right? Data. I can't build bricks without clay. I cannot do this shit. accurately and honorably and correctly without arming myself with this information, right?
I think that's a very fair point too, because to my complaint that I am lodging is that I have had difficulty talking with some people because they become combative and defensive and they feel attacked. And I find my instinct is to continue to attack them. And it is very much a case by case basis. There is no, like you said very well, you and I are talking to a very large audience of people in broad strokes. And there are people in this audience who are going to hear what we say and go, I agree with that in general. And there are people in this audience who are going to hear it and say, I agree with that in general, but there's a couple of things that I'm not so sure about. And there are people who are going to hear it and say, I disagree with everything these two motherfuckers just said.
That's right.
And if you're in that final camp, that's the one where I'm worried, because it's like, what, you can't disagree with everything we just said. And if there's anything that you agree with, then we have somewhere with some common ground to have a conversation.
That's right. And that's the thing. When you say, I disagree with everything you said, then
I know you're full of shit.
No, the only caveat that I have is, well, then you tell me what you believe in. I need you to believe in something. Like I said, the line is drawn for you. So
that's a lot of it too, man.
That's it.
If you ask these people, a lot of people that are yelling right now, if you say, all right, man, I'm here to listen. What the fuck is it that you believe? And like, if you don't like all of this, then what do you think we should do? None of them actually have anything. They just start regurgitating this weird bullshit off Twitter that you fucking don't even realize. Yo, human beings aren't even writing a lot of those headlines, bro. They pay a company to literally take the article and formulate the headline that will get the most clicks.
Right.
And then they put out multiple versions of that headline and feed it to the different demographics of their audience to get different results. Like, you're getting played like a fiddle.
Right.
And that's the look, we have to end or Grant's going to kill me, but that's the thing that's like, if you take anything away from our conversation today, I think what CK said up front was so important. If you just read one thing online in 2020 and you walk away and you're like, I have the information, you're an idiot. You are going to get schooled and lied to and build false narrative on top of false narrative on top of 99% of the internet is trash, bro. You have to Google around, fact check shit, make sure the fucking website you're on is even real. At one point, my mom sent me no offense, Mom, I love you, and I made fun of you for this thoroughly. My mom sent me a link to a website that told me that Pharaoh's army had been discovered at the bottom of the Red Sea. And I went, God damn, that's crazy. That would pretty much prove the Bible in some form is real, which would be a pretty big deal. And I didn't see it trending, and I was like, okay. And I checked the website, and the other articles on the front page of that website were also all fake news. Because there is actual fake news out there, believe it or not. Just not the version that, it's mostly fake news.
So here's the thing. We need to get rid of the word fake news because they used to be just called stories and they used to be called fiction. and it's not fake news. It's just lies. It's stories.
Yeah,
it's just movies. Movies are fake news, right? I mean, so at the end of the day, the thing about it is this. Just like what you said, I mean, first of all, the odds are if they're trying to sell some sort of dick enlarging pill or some sort of weight loss thing, it's usually a huge sign, okay, that website is probably not vetted.
If they don't have high quality advertisements, yeah.
Correct. But secondly, the thing about it is I implore everyone that's listening to this, I'm glad if you disagree with us. You are the people we're talking to. I said, because at the end of the day, all the people that are going to high five us after this conversation, I'm glad. I know you're on our side. That's great.
Yeah, but that's not helping right now.
That's not helping right now. I said, what I want you to do is share this with people that disagree with you, that disagree with us. And sit there and say, maybe try to listen to this because I will promise you this. I'm only going to get deeper in that. I said, It's hard. I'm holding my nose, but it's getting easier. And what I mean by that is I'm starting to get more empathetic and try to understand where these people are coming from. And I say that in a way of saying that anybody who disagrees with me about anything, because I want to get a better understanding about myself and I want to get a better understanding about the situation at hand. And I definitely, if I truly have compassion for people and my fellow man, you're my fellow man, whether you agree with me or not. And I want to understand when the world is going on in your life and the difficulty. And when you sit there and you get defensive and say, I don't have privilege, I'm like, okay, why do you feel that way? And maybe you really do have some stuff going on in your life and that you need some help with and you need to talk to. and you understand that. It doesn't change the fact, like I said, that word is not negative. The word is describing you. Okay, when I say somebody is racist, you get defensive of that because somebody goes, you're racist. And you're like, no, what that means is you're somebody who judges somebody because of their race. Did you do that? Then that's racist. You know what I'm talking about? And that's the word. It's what it means. Don't change it to mean anything other than that.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is if you feel defensive about it, you should, because it's a quality you don't want to be.
Yes.
It's like if all of a sudden somebody comes up to you, it's like, man, look at that tall motherfucker. Like, what part of that word am I offended by?
But there's too much focus on it too, because I'll get this question. It's like, so I either agree with changing all of American history for all these people who are upset about the Confederate stuff they're taking away now, which, by the way, was only a 5-year period. And again, that's just very silly. And also, Texas was not in the fucking... We're not the South. You people are being weird. What was my point? I don't know. I got angry about the Confederacy. Yeah. Dude, I don't understand that in Texas. It never made sense to me, but it's so weird. We have to leave. We have to. CK, where can we follow you on social media? Tell me all of the things we need to support and things we need to keep our eyes out for and ears out for.
I'll tell you, it's always SEEKAYCHIN across Twitter, Instagram, and whatever the other ones are. Is there another one?
No, those are the two that matter.
MySpace, you can be my top 8. And then are
you dancing on TikTok yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, me neither.
And then
2021.
Like I said, we have Native Hostels, Hope Outdoor Gallery, Wu Chow, Swift's Attic. These are my businesses, but support all local businesses. We're all hurting out there, and we're all struggling. We're trying to navigate this the best we can, and we're trying to be safe while we're doing it. And there's a small contingency of all of our restaurateurs that we all gather, and there's documentations going around to try to keep us, and policies and procedures that keep us safe and keep you safe more so than anything. I mean, again, we're leading. I never thought that we would be leading the front lines in this type of thing, but that's what we are, and we're trying to do what we do and be hospitable and take care of you and provide a service for you guys. And so go support where you can. Places that are only doing takeout, take takeout. There are places that are only, that are allowing you to go in. Be patient. If the policy takes a little longer, if they say, hey, you can't come up to the bar, sit down and order a drink. And all I'm asking for is right now is like, if you sit here and say all day that you're upset about the way this thing was handled and that you need help, we'll help that way. And I think that you can help that way by going out there, taking the opportunity, talk to a bar owner, bar restaurant owner, or a small business owner and go, hey, are you doing well? I really enjoyed my time here. Go out there and spread the word about it. Go invite your friends or whatever it is to go and order takeout from them or however you want to do it. But I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. We need compassion. We need it more than ever. And I think that right now, if you're willing to it and you're up to it, and I hope you get up to it quick, have these conversations as often as possible. You should just do it. And I mean, it's just one of those things that you shouldn't, it's uncomfortable. A lot of us, and I said this the other day, man, a lot of us have been uncomfortable for a long time. And that's where the anger comes from. We've had 6 months of having to wear a mask over our face and stay in our homes with AC, free Wi-Fi, food delivery and Amazon, and people were losing.
Dude, I'm living the fucking dream.
And people were losing their mind. And think about how angry would you be if you had to do that for 200 years. Think about how angry you would be that's
and they took away the television and the internet.
Well, think about if we were locked down in fucking the 90s.
And they just whoop your ass all day instead.
I mean, come on. And so at the end of the day, that's the thing. And I mean, I wish we had more time to talk about it.
I always do. But this helps, man. I'm serious.
I'm telling you,
it means a lot that you took the time to come and talk with us today.
Yeah, love each other, man.
As well. And your message is always one of just that compassion that I think is, as you said, more important than literally ever now at this point. It's funny, man, because you ask our parents, they never see anything like this. This is this is another level of movement.
Your parents might not have seen anything like this.
That's what I mean. My parents.
Well, what I'm talking about is sad part about it is there's generations, and it will have generations. And I don't mean to cut you off, but there's
not
generations
Go ahead.
that might have felt that there was nothing they could have done about it.
Yeah.
That was one of the most heartbreaking, I can't sound so stupid saying this, one of the most heartbreaking tweets that I saw was this woman that tweeted and said that her grandmother was with her watching the news, and the grandmother said, oh, look, they're pepper spraying those babies like they did us.
Yeah.
And
nothing has changed.
I read that. I get chills in myself right now saying those words, because in that generation was like, yeah, we dealt with this too. And I bet you how heartbreaking it is that she has to tell her granddaughter, I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I'm sorry we didn't fix it, or we're sorry that it's still like this, you know? And it sucks because I don't want to say that to my kids.
Yeah, man, I'm no longer cool with having to say that to my kids either.
Yeah.
I don't want that for anybody in this world. And I don't think that that's for a lot of people that get defensive when I try to talk to them. And this is, I think you've literally changed my perspective on how I'm going to approach people with this conversation, because I forget I have these conversations with these people because I love and care about them too. And I don't want them to look back 40, 50 years from now and think, holy shit, or maybe never have the realization at all and just die. Because to me, that's a pretty wasted life if you never have compassion for other human beings. So, CK, your message is always very powerful.
I'll close on one thing.
Okay.
And it's just to tie it in with Dave Chappelle. For his birthday, I had a lighter engraved for him with this quote because it impacted me. It was the week that Dick Gregory died, who's another famous black comedian that did what Dave does so well, which is impactfully talk about really heavy stuff, but then find it in a way that's also ironically and funny, and he's a genius as well. And the quote was, the most difficult thing to do is to convince someone of the obvious. And that's what's happening. It's so obvious we ignore it. You know, it's like that saying where they go, you can always see your nose, your brain just erases it. I don't know if you knew about that. You can always see your nose, your brain just erases it. And that's literally what happens. It's so close to us that we have to not deny that it's there. So,
dude,
do that.
It's fucked up. In one of the first episodes I ever did, I was telling a story about this dude. He was a Crip in Houston that I used to buy Coke from. And me and him got to be friends. It was this really weird relationship. But point is this, one night we were just sitting there, both of us are all fucked up. And he was drinking a Coca-Cola can, and he was trying to explain to me perspective, which is sort of a version of what you just said. And he held the Coke can up against my face, and he said, what can you see? And I was like, I can't see shit. And he pulled it back 3 feet and was like, what can you, or, you know, a foot or 6 inches or whatever, to show me now I could see the big label, then pulled it back even further. You can see even more. And I was like, oh, and he was just trying to teach me, like, you see things and then you think that's it.
Yep.
That is very rarely the case. And that's something that for me has been a reawakening of that concept this past few months. And that it's something that I hope I can carry with me for the rest of my life. And that this was a reaffirmation of today. So thank you again, man, for taking the time. Follow CK everywhere. Support his restaurants and his projects. He tweets and Instagrams constantly about things he's getting involved in, not just in the business world, but also on the community level here in Austin and other places. CK, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Love it.
It's seriously
Anytime.
was an honor. We'll do it again soon.